I just arrived here at the Singapore Botanic Gardens, and it is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, which is pretty unique for a botanic garden. I mean, chickens are derived from Asian forest birds such as these, so it's very cool to see them in the wild. So we're right here at the trellis garden, and you could just see how expansive this park really is. And since we don't have all day, I think we'll go and focus on the foliage garden, because I would imagine that we would see quite a few plants there that we would recognize as houseplant enthusiasts. Okay, we're here at the foliage garden, and even just looking around, I could identify a few species right offhand. This one I think is kind of recognizable, but also unique. This one is Schefflera elliptica, and you'll probably recognize it just from the genus alone, because we have Scheffleras in our house, like Schefflera actinophila, for example, and they have that kind of umbrella shape to their leaves. But this in general is just a new species here that I typically wouldn't see in a houseplant. Here's some others that you'll recognize. This is a Pilea, and you'll see that it has these urticaceous style or nettle style flowers, and this is often called, a common name of this would be aluminum plant, partially because of the silvery look of the leaves as well. These are some Pellionias. These are some really dark versions that I typically don't see. This one's a little bit more common, but if you look closely at these Pellionias, they're almost like a dark, ruddy, metallic black. They might actually be the same species, Pellionia repens, but it might just be a different cultivar or a different form or variation of it. This one is a relatively new one to me as a houseplant. This is Elatostemma vittatum, and initially when I got Elatostemma, it was just Elatostemma spa, so I don't even know if I have the same species here, but I picked it up from Steve's Leaves. And this one's a little bit more challenging because you don't want to let it dry out, and you can see that this is an understory plant growing in the shade, so it's not going to want any type of direct sun. If you come over here too, you'll see that there's more Pellionias here. This one is pretty nice. It's got this like silvery look, which is quite nice. This is a Pilea nummulariifolia, and these are also fairly common houseplants. I never see them quite large. I mean, sometimes I see them in hanging baskets or in 4-inch pots. This one's growing nicely under the understory. This one is a real stunner, although I'm not even quite sure what kind of plant this is. It almost looks like it could become pretty large, like almost like a tree. But the foliage is really beautiful. This one is nice. You get it in the summer months. You could get it and grow it outdoors, but it can also be a pretty decent indoor plant. This is a Strobilanthes right here. And you could get them with very deep purple undersides, but you could also get them with purple tops. Actually, here is one right here. I was gonna say there wasn't an example of that, but you could actually get a look at some of the purple on the new foliage here. And that's Strobilanthes maculata. This is a beautiful plant. I don't know why I don't see this as a house plant in North America yet, but this is an Ardisia. And you can see how beautiful and metallic the leaves are. And they have these little serrations on the edges of the leaves. Now this aroid has become a hot topic as of late. This is always known as Philodendron goldieana. It's a beautiful plant. I have one in my home, and it starts to get these kind of like elkhorn-like shapes, but with all these different leaflets off of one stem and one stalk. But this one is now called Thaumatophyllum spruceanum. So there's all this kind of discussion within the botanical world of actually taking some of those philodendrons that we know and love and putting them into the Thaumatophyllum genera. I love this variegated species. This is a Dracaena goldieana. This one's a much larger one than I'm typically used to, but you get that when you're growing in this perfect climate. I love the variegation of this leaf, and look at how some of the earlier leaves have this purple bottom. You don't get that when it's actually mature. This one's a beautiful one. You have to have the right conditions in your home, but this is Cissus discolor, and you'll see that it has these beautiful red purple bottoms and variegation on the top with this like grayish green, dark green hue, and then that purple red bottom, which is super common in plants that are understory plants because they get more of the green light and they pump that back up from the red bottoms into the leaf top, giving the leaf a second chance in order to be able to get light. And this one is a vine, as you can see, and it is growing all the way around. Okay, so this is a very exciting species. I started seeing this in Europe, but this Scindapsus treubii is super cool. You're seeing the light form right here. I have both the light form and the dark form, but you'll see this is common among aroids. It starts to crawl and has a very different form on the bottom, and once it attaches itself to a tree, it'll start to get these mature leaves and will shingle up the tree in order to be able to get light. Their leaves start to usually elongate or get much larger. Sometimes they become holy and develop these windows or fenestrations in the leaves. And I'm sure if I come back here 3, 4, or 5 years from now, the leaves will be even much larger if they're up towards the canopy. Beautiful plant, and it looks particularly beautiful in its less mature form. So it looks like they planted a lot of Dracaenas and cordylines here, a lot of different versions and cultivars. So I think this is a really nice look at what we typically see in plant shops. Even this one that looks a little bit different, that's variegated, this is a type of Dracaena. And this one is also quite new. I haven't really seen it in the States, but I do see it sometimes at Botanic Gardens, and I've seen it a lot here in Asia, which is a type of Dracaena, which it looks like it has little gold flecks on it. These are really cool plants. They're called tapeworm plants for obvious reasons. They have these really flattened stems, so this is Homalocladiums, and they have the leaflets coming off the flattened stems this way. Very unique plant, and just starting to see this also in the houseplant market. It's also right next to this beautiful begonia here. This is a cane begonia. Yeah, it's pretty tall. You could see some ones with spots on the bottom. A lot of the times the younger leaves of begonias will start with spots, and then as they mature, they start to lose their spots, as you see here. Now this plant is a Sanchezia, and I had one of these plants. It was very needy. It liked to be watered at all times. It eventually did get spider mites on it, and as much as I battled with it, I ended up losing it to spider mites. It's a great plant. It grows like gangbusters, but like I said, it requires a lot of water. I'm looking at it here. It's kind of in a little swampy area, so you could already tell that it likes to have wet feet. And then if we go over here, you just see an incredible knoll of begonias, and there's all different cultivar species and varieties here. I can't even begin to name any of them because I'm not that much of a begonia expert, but I would like to point out this large leaf maidenhair fern. I think these are such a nice variation to the smaller leaved varieties that we typically see in houseplant markets. I just got one of these and put it in my green wall, and it looks still so dainty, yet with those larger leaves, very striking. I see some more begonias over here as well. So it looks like they just kind of undulate and continue over to this knoll, but we got some really great cane begonias over here and some Rex begonias down below. This is another plant that loves wet feet. This is a papyrus plant. It's like a reed, and if you run your hands over or your fingers over it, you have to be a little bit careful because it can cut you, and it means that this plant needs a little bit of silica in order to keep upright. So that's typical, I think, among certain plants, like certain grasses, certain reeds, and also, gosh, I can't think of the name of that one plant, horsetails. Horsetails are quite common. They have a lot of silica. And then this one's a really neat one. This is a type of aroid, it also needs to be in water. This one has a beautiful inflorescence that is starting right here. But if you take a look at the stems of this plant, they have some spikes on it. So this is a Certosperma, grows like a weed. Not very practical for an indoor plant, but a very cool aroid. Now I see a bloom right over here. Yeah, this looks like a Kaempferia, so it's a type of ginger. So you see this little bloom right here, and these are the leaves. And I see this one, again, not a very noticeable leaf. I mean, aside from the fact that it's big, there's nothing spectacular about it. But this was a past bloom Taka right here, probably a black bat flower. This one's becoming a little bit more common as a houseplant. This is an Alocasia Stingray, a quite large one. What's interesting about this is that it's right at the edge of the water, so this kind of tells me that it likes to be probably moist at all times. Now I can't see the name of that plant, but it looks like a Xanthosoma to me. It's kind of mutated. It has a variegation. It has a little bit like leaves like butterflies. I'm not exactly certain what species that is, but it does look like a Xanthosoma. Oh, this is a nice aroid. I don't have it as a houseplant, but this is Schismatoglossus calyptrata. I love the way that this variegation looks on this leaf because it's right down between the edge and the central vein, and I think it looks really sharp. Speaking of variegation, this is a Dieffenbachia, which we will be very familiar with as a houseplant. It's also called dumb cane. The reason why it's called dumb cane is that it has calcium oxalate crystals, so if you or a family member or a dog or cat eat this, sometimes they could get very sick eating this plant. But those calcium oxalate crystals actually help protect the plant and help it filter light a lot better through its leaves. Some really cool Selaginella right here. This one has kind of like a ruddy brown top and also a red undersurface. Nice Kaempferia through here as well. This almost seems like an unremarkable plant, but this is an Aspidistra. The reason why I'm going to point it out is that it's an incredible houseplant to grow indoors. It takes a lot of beating and doesn't require a tremendous amount of light. It looks like they have some variegated versions in here. You could get some cultivated species with stripes or dots or splashes on it. I'm starting to see some of my favorite family plants over here. This is a Calathea Worskenwiskii. I love this plant because it feels so good. It has this kind of volutinous feel to it. If you turn it over, it has that dark purplish red underside and it has this really beautiful top. This is not in flower yet, but it gets these really beautiful creamy white flowers on these long stalks. Next to it is another Calathea. This one's a cultivar. This is called Silver Plate. I've seen this around Asia quite often. Again, it has that nice purple red underside, and you could see the flowers on this one, this little inflorescence sticking up, and you can imagine that's just like what the Calathea Worskenwiskii looks like, but just with creamy white. This ginger looks like it's gotten eaten quite a bit. It's a variegated ginger, and gingers are very common here in Asia, but this one looks like it got beat up a little bit. This one looks similar to the Calathea Worskenwiskii that I had showed you earlier. Also has that volutinous feel, just really though on the top. This is a Calathea zebrina. And if you just look in the distance there, you'll also see one with dark green splotches, and that is a rattlesnake Calathea. And in the back, in the pink, it's a flame flower, otherwise known as a Piscia. That's a very beautiful one because it has that kind of red flower in the back as well as those fuzzy pink leaves. Not in the Marentaceae family, but what is that Stromanthe stromantoides with that kind of rainbow look. You'll see it has a red underside and some dark green and white painted tops. Really beautiful collection of plants right here, and you could tell that they're focusing on variegation in this area. Some Metanilla right here, which have gone gangbusters. I mean, look how big these leaves and these flowers are. Another example of variegated gingers. These look a little healthier than the other ones. They haven't gotten munched on too much by insects. This is another beautiful calathea. I think one of the easier ones to actually work with at home. These get bright yellow flowers on the base, so it doesn't come up on a long stalk like the other ones, but you could see that this one is nice and fuzzy. It has, again, that iconic kind of purple-red underside, but you could see that it has this kind of fuzz as well along the vein and the base of the leaf. And of course, I'll have to highlight this Spathiphyllum. This is in bloom right now with the spathe and the spadex here. We have a lot of different cultivated varieties of Spathiphyllums. I mean, there's so many different versions. I'm not quite sure what this one is. It might be Floribunda, but these leaves are a lot tougher than the leaves that I'm used to with the Spathiphyllums that I typically get at garden centers. So guys, what did you think of that tour of the foliage garden at Singapore Botanic Gardens? There was so much to see, and I recognized so many plants, but there were a lot of other ones as well. And they were growing so big and beautifully, which just goes to show you what a little bit of heat and humidity will get you. Tell me what you liked most about this tour and if you found any new species that you hadn't seen before. And if you want to support this channel, then be sure to plant that finger on the subscribe button so you can be tuned in to episodes every week. And you can always follow my daily journeys at my blog at homesteadbrooklyn.com and on Instagram at homesteadbrooklyn. I'll see you guys next week. Curious to learn more about how you could grow and care for your plants you saw in this video indoors? Then you may want to check out the Houseplant Masterclass, which is the first online audiovisual course on houseplant cultivation, care, maintenance, and more at houseplantmasterclass.com. And if you're interested in developing a richer, deeper relationship with plants, then pick up a copy of my latest book, How to Make a Plant Love You. See where I'll be on book tour on the events section of my website at homesteadbrooklyn.com/workshops. I may just be in your neck of the woods.